So today we're going to talk about how we're going to start a oil painting of a bumblebee. Now you can always apply the same concept to other insects on flowers. Like, I mean, I know a hummingbird isn't an insect, but you could have a hummingbird instead of a bumblebee. You could also have a butterfly, I guess a fly. It's not as pretty as a butterfly, but we're doing a bumblebee. So with the bumblebee, we want to plan out our composition where the bumblebee is kind of in the upper corner, because a lot of times that's an area of interest compositionally. You don't really want to have your most interesting part of the composition in the very middle, because it's boring. Now, if you have other elements that balance it out, then it's a little less boring. So like on mine, I have my bumblebee kind of in the upper area, and then I have a little bit more detailed flowers so that the focus is here, but also on the bumblebee. So what I'm going to start with first is figuring out where I want my bumblebee to go. So like I said, I'm going to put mine in the upper corner, and a lot of times I can start with just like an oval like that, so I know what direction I want my bumblebee to go.
Are we drawing on the canvas?
Yes.
Okay.
Whoops, I dropped my pencil. And you can draw directly onto your canvas, or you can draw on a separate piece of paper, whatever you feel comfortable with. So I'm starting off with just like a little oval. Then I'm gonna overlap that with a smaller circle for his head. And from there, then I wanna look at how the next part of his body is a little bit higher than the head. So I'm gonna make this part come up. I'll have his little stripes. He has kind of like a triangle butt. And you can only really see a few legs in photos of bees. And we're doing kind of a very simple kind of shape of the bee. And then he has like little legs. And then for like the flowers, once we get ready to do those, you can do them as very like loose flowers, where I really just am planning out kind of the shape. Not really any details or things like that, just kind of having the overall shape like this. Or if you know that you want a lot more detail in your flowers, then I would probably spend more time drawing them. Like especially if they were going to be like daisies, I would start with the center and then lightly draw some long ovals. And then from there, I'll go back and add more detail. Once I have my bee and flowers drawn, and if I've drawn it on a separate piece of paper, then I can transfer it using carbon or transfer paper. And then what we're gonna do next is we're going to be toning our canvas. So the reason why we tone our canvas is just so that our colors, you know, we can kind of see them a little bit better, because a lot of times if you're comparing the value of a color or brightness to white, everything will look super dark. So that's why a lot of times it's good to kind of get a medium value on here. Or we're going to be toning with like this cadmium yellow, and we'll actually be having a little bit of that color showing through when we do our background. And so this is watered down acrylic. So I'm going to take some water on a paintbrush and add some of the yellow. And then basically I'm just going to paint over the whole entire canvas. If you really want a lot of coats, I normally recommend doing one layer in one direction, then once it dries, going on top in the opposite direction, just so you get full coverage. So once I have my colors out on my palette, what I want to do first is mix up a lot of light blue. Now, since I want a light blue, that's why I'm going to start off with white, and then I'm going to add a little bit of my first blue. So this is cobalt blue, which by itself is a very pretty kind of light blue. And then if I wanted to deepen it a little bit, or maybe it was like too purpley, especially if you're using like ultramarine blue, then I could take a little bit of phthalo blue. You see how phthalo blue has a little bit more green to it. And we don't have to stick to just one type of blue. Since we're painting this a little impressionistically, I'll have like a mix that's like this, then I'll have some to the side that's even lighter. And could even have a little bit of green. Once you have your colors mixed, for this, since we're again practicing impressionism, trying to be, you know, kind of more painterly and have big brush strokes, you want to try and paint with a larger brush than you do all the time. And a lot of this painting, what I'm going to do is I'm going to double dip in my colors. So I'm going to take blue on both sides and then a little white. And what that does is it creates some variety when I'm doing these brush strokes. And if you feel like you're not sure how thick of a painting you want to do, a lot of times you can add a little solvent to your paint and start off with that and then slowly use more paint. But basically what I'm doing is just using my blues, trying to do just big strokes. And I'm going to use some of my light blue, some of my dark blue. I can even go back and grab more dark blue, like that. And I'm just going to go ahead and fill the whole thing. Now, as we go lower and start getting to our flowers, I'm going to want to use more green. And if you want, you could even make a darker green using the phthalo blue and your yellow, rather than adding white to it. Last thing we'll do is you can make a darker green with the phthalo blue and a little yellow. And if it looks too bright, then I can tone it down with a little bit of red. And if I'm able to, I can just block in some of my little stems for my flowers. Or if you're not sure like where you want to put your flowers, you could always do that later. So sometimes I'll just have some darker greens just to kind of balance where I want to put the stems later. And then that's about the end of this part. And then next we will be working on our flowers and our bee. So now we're going to start by working on our bee and then down to our flowers. And then if you need to do another layer in your sky, we can actually use that to cut into the shape of our bee a little bit, because our bee isn't super tiny, so we don't have to worry too much about accidentally running them over. And with this, since we're doing more of an impressionistic painting, it's okay to have like kind of some blurred edges. So what I'm going to have out is some white, black. I have ivory black, but you can use whatever black you have. And then I have phthalo blue, burnt sienna, and then I have Hansa yellow medium, but you could also just use like a cad yellow light or something that's kind of a brighter yellow. You don't want it like too deep. And then for flowers, it depends what color you want your flowers to be. So I could make my flowers pink and use like a quinacridone magenta, or you could make them purple because bees really like the color purple. Or you could even do them white or something different. So with our bee, what we're gonna start with is, we're gonna start with the yellows, just because it's easier to put black on top of yellows than it is to try and do yellow next to black, because it's very easily gonna get contaminated. So what I wanna do first is I can take my cadmium yellow light, and what I want to do is I'm basically going to use this color kind of like my medium value on the bee, and I'm going to use this to fill in my yellow sections. So it's over here, then there's a black section, and then there's a little bit of yellow over here. Y'all can kind of see the difference since we toned it yellow. And then while this is wet, then I'm going to take that same yellow, and to make a kind of darker shade, more of kind of a golden shade of yellow, I'm going to take a little bit of burnt sienna, mix it in, and this is going to be the shadow on our bee. Now for this, we're trying to practice doing very few brush strokes and being a little more impressionistic. So for this, I could go from the bottom of my bee and just drag it up and just leave it. You know, I don't want to fiddle around and think about it too much, because you want it to look effortless as best as we can. So I'm going to do that on this one as well. And then I would wipe off my paintbrush. And the last part of the yellow is going to be adding a lot of white. And then add some white to the yellow, and I'm going to bloop, plop some highlights. Now, if it doesn't look bright enough, you could always do another, you know, swap of white on top. But this will be kind of like the main values on the yellow part of it. Once I'm done blocking in my yellow sections, then I can wipe off my paintbrush, or use a different paintbrush if it's really contaminated. And I can use just straight black. And what I'm going to do is just block in the black sections, and then we'll come back and highlight on top of it. So I'm not worried about, like with the yellow, adding variation at this stage. I'm just kind of filling it in. And this is a great time where you can kind of see if you need to change the body shape of your bee at all. Like sometimes I'll realize, ew, I didn't make it fat enough or small enough or fluffy enough.
This is just straight black.
Yep, just straight black.
Sarah,
So next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start putting some highlights on our black. Now, for the black, since this is a bee, a lot of times their hair has other colors besides just grays and blacks. So we're actually gonna take burnt sienna and a little bit of white and our black, so it makes more of a brownish gray. And I'm going to use that just to plop some little highlights, boop, up on top.
Burnt siennas.
Yep. Next, what I'm going to do is just block in the white. So what's interesting about the wings of the bee is if you just use white and kind of paint the white in the direction of the wing, it will drag a little bit of your gray, because it's, you know, mixing with the black. And that's actually a good thing, because it's going to add a little bit of texture to our wings. So I'll start with just kind of filling them in with the white. And then I can always come back if they look like they're just blending together, and I could take just a smidge of black and go in and separate a little bit. So that adds a little texture and also just helps us to see this wing versus the other wing. And then the back of our bumblebee also has that white. So, and if it kind of blends in a little bit, that's okay, because we can always go back and brighten or darken our background around it, and that'll make it show up a little bit better. Now, before I add the antenna and the legs on my bee, I'm gonna start blocking in my flowers, because I actually wanna use my background to kind of cut in a little bit on my bee, and then I'll do my legs on top. just because it's a very, you know, small little part of our painting. Now for the flowers, you can do whatever color you want, but you want to think about what kind of color is going to help your painting to pop, and also what kind of color attracts bees. So like I would recommend, you know, warmer colors, like maybe a pink, a purple, but you could also do things like white flowers. You could even have like a mishmash of different kinds of colors. So if I want to make a pink flower, then I would take like my quinacridone magenta and add some white, and that makes a really great pink. Or if I want to make a purple, I could just add a little bit of phthalo blue like that. So, and with this way that we're doing the flowers, what I want to do is I'm just going to block them in with my darkest color of my flower. So like I have this purple, and I would just do some big brush strokes like this for blocking in the petals. And then after I do that for all the flower, then I'll come back with a little bit of white, and I can just streak some highlights in there. And again, we're trying to keep it kind of loose. So if you're doing like cup flowers, whatever kind of flowers you're doing, you're just trying to do it in very few brush strokes. So once you've done your flowers, then you can take your phthalo blue and a little bit of yellow, and I can make a green. And basically what I'm gonna do is just kind of block in some big like petal shapes. And if it looks too bluey, then you just add more yellow, or if it needs to be more toned down, then I add a little bit of cad red. And then basically blocking in just some big kind of shapes of leaves and some stems. And then after that, I can look and see what empty space I have, and then I can go back and start re-adding some more of my background. Like in between some of my flowers, I have a little bit extra space, so I could just fill that with more green. Or I can go back to my background, which was the phthalo blue and white, and just do a little bit more of that background color. And one of the last things we can do on our bee is I can take just my black and I can paint in my little legs. So we don't really see all of the legs a lot of times when a bee is flying like this. So most of the time I'll do like 3 like that, and then have like maybe a shorter one over there. And then his little antenna, I'm gonna have stick out and then go down a little bit. And then if I accidentally make like my antenna a little bit too thick, I can always wipe off my paintbrush and then get my sky color again and just use that to cut it off a little bit. So that's a little skinny. Doot. That too, yes. You can also use it to go around your wings.